Abraham, often called the father of faith, is one of the most significant figures in the Bible. His life, relationships, and covenant with God are central to Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Most people are familiar with his wives, Sarah and Hagar, but there's another woman in his story who often goes unnoticed, Keturah. Her presence in the Bible is brief, yet her significance is undeniable. Keturah is mentioned in Genesis 25, described as Abraham's wife after Sarah's death. Who was she, and why is her story so overlooked? Keturah is often referred to as Abraham's forgotten wife because her role in biblical history has been overshadowed by Sarah and Hagar. Sarah, as Abraham's first wife, bore Isaac, the child of promise. Hagar, Sarah's servant, bore Ishmael, who became the ancestor of many Arab nations. Keturah, however, is a mystery to many readers. The Bible provides minimal details about her, but what we do know is that she bore Abraham 6 sons. These sons went on to establish nations of their own, continuing Abraham's legacy in a lesser-known way. Genesis 25:1 states, Abraham took another wife, whose name was Keturah. This simple statement introduces her, but it raises several questions. When did Abraham marry her? Was it after Sarah's death, or was she already in his life? Some scholars suggest that Keturah may have been a concubine during Sarah's lifetime and later elevated to the status of a wife. Others believe she came into Abraham's life after Sarah's passing. The lack of clarity in the biblical text has fueled centuries of debate among theologians. One intriguing aspect of Keturah's story is her sons. She bore Abraham 6 children: Zimran, Jokshan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. These sons became the progenitors of various tribes and nations. For example, the Midianites, descended from her son Midian, play a significant role in biblical history. Moses' father-in-law Jethro was a Midianite priest. Despite their prominence, Keturah's sons are rarely discussed in sermons or biblical studies. This omission contributes to the perception of Keturah as a secondary figure. Keturah's story also highlights the complexity of Abraham's family dynamics. With Sarah, Hagar, and Keturah, Abraham's household was far from simple. Each wife and their children had unique roles and destinies. While Isaac inherited the covenantal promise, Ishmael and Keturah's sons were also blessed in their own ways. Genesis 25:5-6 mentions that Abraham gave gifts to the sons of his concubines and sent them away from Isaac. This act ensured that Isaac's inheritance remained secure while still providing for his other children. The cultural and historical context of Keturah's time sheds light on her role in Abraham's life. In ancient Mesopotamia, it was common for men of wealth and status to have multiple wives or concubines. These unions were often strategic, strengthening alliances or increasing a family's labor force. Keturah's marriage to Abraham may have been motivated by similar considerations. However, the Bible emphasizes her role as a mother, focusing on the nations that came from her lineage rather than her personal story. Keturah's name itself is intriguing. In Hebrew, her name is often associated with incense or fragrance, symbolizing something pleasing or significant. This interpretation has led some scholars to view her as a woman of virtue and importance. Her role as the mother of nations aligns with Abraham's calling to be the father of many. Keturah's legacy, though overshadowed, contributes to the fulfillment of God's promise to Abraham. The New Testament briefly alludes to Keturah's significance. In Galatians 4:22-31, Paul contrasts Sarah and Hagar to illustrate the difference between law and grace. While Keturah is not mentioned by name, her son's inclusion in Abraham's broader lineage demonstrates the diversity of God's blessings. Through Keturah, we see that God's promises extended beyond Isaac and Ishmael, reaching into the lives of many nations and peoples. Despite her limited mention, Keturah's story has inspired countless interpretations and discussions. Some traditions outside the Bible, such as the writings of Josephus and other ancient Jewish texts, expand on her role. These accounts often portray her as a significant figure in Abraham's later life, a partner who brought comfort and continuation to his lineage. While these texts are not considered canonical, they highlight the enduring curiosity surrounding her. Keturah's story also raises questions about the broader role of women in the Bible. Like many female figures, her contributions are briefly mentioned, yet they have lasting implications. Her sons and their descendants played roles in biblical narratives and beyond. Keturah's life reminds us that even seemingly minor characters in Scripture can have profound impacts, contributing to God's unfolding plan for humanity. The story of Keturah also challenges readers to reconsider the narratives they prioritize. While Sarah and Hagar's stories are more detailed, Keturah's life adds depth to Abraham's legacy. Her story invites us to explore the less obvious but equally important aspects of biblical history. By examining her life, we gain a fuller understanding of God's faithfulness to Abraham and his descendants. Keturah's legacy extends beyond her immediate family. The nations that came from her sons influenced the cultural and political landscape of the ancient Near East. For example, the Midianites were a significant group mentioned multiple times in the Bible. This highlights how Keturah's story is interwoven with the broader biblical narrative, even if she is not the central focus. Abraham's relationship with Keturah also reflects the themes of restoration and continuity. After Sarah's death, Keturah became a part of Abraham's life, symbolizing new beginnings. Her role as a mother of nations aligns with God's promise to make Abraham the father of many. Keturah's presence in the narrative reminds us that God's plans often unfold in unexpected ways. The mystery surrounding Keturah's story has led to various interpretations over the centuries. Some scholars argue that her brief mention in the Bible was intentional, emphasizing the covenant through Isaac. Others believe her story was downplayed due to the focus on Sarah and Hagar. Regardless, Keturah's life is a testament to God's ability to work through all people, regardless of their prominence in the biblical text. In exploring Keturah's story, we also gain insight into the complexities of biblical families. Abraham's household included multiple wives, children, and dynamics that required wisdom and discernment. Keturah's presence added to this complexity, yet it also fulfilled God's promise to Abraham. Her story is a reminder that God's plans are often larger than what we can immediately see. Keturah's sons and their descendants serve as a testament to the diversity and reach of Abraham's legacy. While the Bible emphasizes the covenant with Isaac, it does not diminish the significance of Abraham's other children. The lineage of Keturah reflects how God's blessings were not confined to one branch of Abraham's family. Her sons became leaders of tribes that interacted with Israel throughout biblical history, showing how interconnected their stories were. One of Keturah's most notable descendants was the Midianites, a group that played a recurring role in the Old Testament. The Midianites were sometimes adversaries of Israel, such as during the time of Gideon, but they were also allies, as seen through Jethro, Moses' father-in-law. These dual roles illustrate the complexity of relationships between Abraham's descendants and Israel. Keturah's connection to these stories underscores her hidden but vital impact. Despite her limited presence in the text, Keturah's life prompts reflection on the themes of inclusion and unity. Her story shows that God's blessings were not exclusive to Isaac's line, but extended to other children of Abraham. This inclusiveness foreshadows the message of the New Testament, where salvation is offered to all people. Keturah's story, though subtle, aligns with the broader biblical theme of God's universal plan. Another aspect of Keturah's story worth exploring is her role as Abraham's companion in his later years. After Sarah's death, Abraham may have faced loneliness and a sense of loss. Keturah likely brought him comfort and companionship, helping to sustain him during his final years. This humanizes Abraham, showing that even great patriarchs had personal needs and relationships that mattered deeply to them. The brevity of Keturah's mention in the Bible also raises questions about how biblical narratives are shaped. The focus on Sarah and Isaac, as well as Hagar and Ishmael, reflects the centrality of the covenant. However, Keturah's inclusion reminds readers that the Bible often highlights individuals whose stories contribute to a greater purpose. Her presence, though brief, is a reminder of the richness and diversity within Abraham's family. Keturah's sons, listed in Genesis 25, represent a significant yet often overlooked branch of Abraham's family tree. Each of these sons became the founder of nations, extending Abraham's influence beyond Canaan. For example, Midian's descendants are known to have spread across the Arabian Peninsula and beyond. The expansion of these tribes demonstrates how God's promise to Abraham, to make him the father of many nations, was fulfilled through multiple lineages. One of the intriguing mysteries about Keturah's story is her background. The Bible provides no details about her origins, leaving readers to speculate. Some traditions suggest she may have been a Canaanite or even of a more distant lineage. Regardless of her heritage, Keturah's marriage to Abraham underscores that God's plans often transcend cultural and ethnic boundaries. Her inclusion in the narrative points to the universality of God's blessings. Keturah's sons received gifts from Abraham before his death, as noted in Genesis 25:6. This act of generosity ensured that they were provided for while maintaining Isaac's unique role as the heir of the covenant. Abraham's wisdom in dividing his estate reflects the complexities of managing a large family with diverse futures. Keturah's story highlights the balance between fairness and the fulfillment of God's specific promises. The story of Keturah and her sons also reflects the broader biblical theme of nations arising from individuals. Abraham's legacy through Keturah illustrates how one person's faithfulness to God can impact countless generations. Though her role is understated, Keturah's life serves as a reminder that every individual has a part to play in God's plan, even if their contributions are not widely recognized. Keturah's life offers an example of how God uses seemingly minor characters to achieve his purposes. While Sarah's and Hagar's stories receive more attention, Keturah's role is no less significant in fulfilling God's promises to Abraham. Her story teaches us to value every person's contribution, regardless of how prominent or hidden it may seem. In God's plan, no one is insignificant. The nations that descended from Keturah's sons often intersected with Israel in various ways, shaping the region's history and culture. These interactions, whether peaceful or conflictual, were part of God's overarching plan for his chosen people. Keturah's descendants remind us that even those outside the central covenant had roles in God's narrative, reflecting his sovereignty over all nations. The story of Keturah also challenges modern readers to rethink how they view biblical families. Abraham's life was marked by complexities, including his relationships with Sarah, Hagar, and Keturah. These relationships were not without tension, but they also demonstrate how God can work through human imperfections to fulfill his promises. Keturah's story adds depth to Abraham's family dynamics.